Hi guys, today we're going to get started with soldering our wire rings, and to begin we want to make sure that we're taking safety precautions. So you're first going to make sure that you are wearing goggles. We want to make sure that we're protecting our eyes, especially while working with flames. The second thing is if you have long hair, loose clothing, jewelry, any of those things, we want to have those tucked away or tied back. You can see my hair is tied back. I don't want anything able to dangle in the area that I'm going to be using the torch. So once you have those two things ready, we can get started soldering. Alright, so let's talk about how to use this acetylene torch. So this little knob over here is how you're going to turn the acetylene on and off. And you'll notice when I turn it on and off, there's not going to be a flame. It's just the gas coming out, okay? So I'm going to take this nozzle and I'm going to rotate it away from me, and that's what's going to turn this on. And you should be able to hear the acetylene coming out. And then I'm going to turn that towards me, and that's what turns the acetylene off, okay? Now, in order to turn the flame on, to ignite the flame, I'm going to use a striker. Okay, so this is my striker. On this side, I'm going to push and I'm going to pull it across, and that's going to create a little spark. Okay, I'm pushing and I'm pulling with this part, pushing and pulling to create that spark that will then ignite our acetylene torch. So I'm going to again turn this on. I want to hear a light whisper. Okay, I don't want to hear a really loud gust of acetylene. I want a light whisper. I'm going to take my striker and I'm going to ignite that. And now we have our flame. To turn it off, I'm gonna, again, turn that nozzle towards me really slowly to turn that off. There is sometimes a little bit of a backfire that happens here, but if your hand is on this handle, you will be just fine. If you turn it off slow enough, that won't happen. All right, so I have my ends filed. I'm gonna play with it and finagle it until my two ends meet in somewhat of a circular position. And I'm going to put them into this third arm. This third arm does exactly what its name says. It acts as our third arm. It holds our piece for us while we are using the torch. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I have my piece almost ready here. I have my piece ready. I'm just going to pinch these parts together, and that's what's going to open that up for me to put my wire in. Now that my piece is all set up in my third arm, I'm going to start by applying some flux. This is our flux, and there's a paintbrush sitting right next to it. I'm just going to dip the paintbrush in and put a very light little layer right on that seam, right where those two pieces meet. And I'm not using a ton, just a little bit. I'm going to make sure to put the cap on and put that back. The next thing I'm going to grab is my solder, okay? And there are three types of solder. I am going to start using the hard solder because I want this to be the most durable joint I can get. I want it to be a really solid joint. So inside of here are our solder pieces. They're called solder pallions. They're tiny little pieces of metal. Okay, here's what they look like. You can't really see it, but if it were focused, you would see. That flux is going to act like a little bit of glue and hold that in place for us. And I'm just placing that solder right on that joint there, right where those two ends meet. It's really important to make sure you shut the solder so that all those pieces don't fly out. And next I'm going to start my torch and I'm going to heat that up. So again, a light whisper. And then I'm going to use the striker to ignite that. And now the tip of this cone, this blue cone here, is the hottest part of the flame. This wire is really thin, so I don't need a lot of heat. Instead, I'm going to use the bushy orange end of this flame, and I'm going to go in slow circular motions around the entire piece of wire. I'm not focusing on one point. I'm going around the entire piece. I want the whole thing to heat up. So slow circular motions. And we're going to wait to watch the solder ball up and flow into that joint to connect them. Slow circular motions. I'm using the end of the flame. I don't need to add too much heat. That's what will happen, and if I do, it will melt the wire because it's so thin. All right, my solder's starting to go. All right, and I am done. So you might be wondering, how do you know when your metal has flowed? How do you know when it has filled that joint? And the way to know is that solder goes in stages. The first stage is when you just set it on your piece and it's just in that solder pallion form. What happens when you start to heat it up is it will start to form into a little ball. Then you're going to continue to heat it, and that ball is then just going to kind of flow. It's just going to kind of melt into that surface, and it'll get really shiny, and that's how you know when your solder is finished. I'm going to again turn the knob towards me slowly and turn that acetylene torch off. Because I'm not using a lot of heat, this is not hot yet. I'm, however, going to use tweezers on the other side. I'm going to pick up my piece and I'm going to go quench it. So once I take my piece off of that third arm, I'm going to quench it. And what that means is I'm going to dip it into this jar of water. And what that does is it takes all the heat off of this metal so that I can check that joint, that seam. I can check and make sure that it went and it's going to stay. So I'm going to pull on these pieces, and if I'm pulling and it's not coming apart, that means I'm done with the solder joint and we're ready to move on to the next step.
Count all your ones and twos, 'cause we all need something to do. Inside out, yeah, we just got to turn ourselves inside out. Yeah, we just got to turn ourselves inside out.